Sir, good evening to the viewers of Pandit Ravi Shankar Music Foundation. We are today in our 57th episode of Reflections, celebrating 100 years of none other than Bharat Ratna Pandit Ravi Shankar ji. And today we are having our guest on the 57th episode who will be sharing his memories of Pandit ji. Is an creative arts industry through Sama Arts Network as its chief executive and artistic director. He also heads a music publishing company where he licenses music of all genres to films, television, and documentaries. He has created over 1700 event production presenting over 3500 artists and presented them in more than 400 events in UK and abroad. On behalf of Pandit Ravi Shankar Music Foundation, I welcome Shri Jay Visvadeva to our show Reflections.
Greetings.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
To our show Reflections.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this platform. I'm really delighted.
Thank you, same here also. And to speak to you, conversation is senior disciple of Pandit Ravi Shankar ji, Gaurav Mazumdar.
Thank you.
Namaste, Jay.
Greetings, Gaurav. Lovely to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you, Jay. Namaste, Nabarun. Thank you.
Namaste, Gaurav ji.
Thank you.
And this is my first live chat on on virtual platform.
Really?
Yeah.
I have remained in the background, dormant somewhere in the storage. going through what 50 years of work with eating a lot of dust.
I'm so happy that we are able to do this. I'm so happy because
I think it's an important celebration, put it this way.
it's a very important celebration, and it's, I think, very important that we call you, Jay, because I have so much respect for you. I have seen you for over 30 years now, and the amount of work, amount of passion you have put for South Asian music, for Indian classical music is amazing. It's amazing. I think no amount of talking is enough. Your work speaks. It speaks volumes. Your journey. Apparently, you were born in East Africa, in Kenya,
Yes.
and then you moved to England in 1970.
Yeah.
I would like to know your background, Jay. Your family, your childhood in Kenya. It's a beautiful country. I love Kenya. And then coming to London, how was it? And what was the musical landscape of England when you arrived, when you were there?
Yeah, thank you, Gaurav. I think I can recall between the ages of 8 and 11 in Nairobi. It was my formative years of listening to, watching music, whatever that was available. And as a child, it was limited, And I belonged to so many different clubs. I used to play hockey. And in the evening, I used to go to the Gurdwara, to the temple, wherever my training was, my school sent me. And then also I happened to participate in a National Theatre production of Who Stole the Pudding. So my first taste of stage was at the age of 8, and I was one of the 2 courtiers. So those were my years of upbringing, that from school to practice hockey, from hockey go to the temples, Gurdwara. My friends also took me at various places. So I think the music part got inculcated at a very young age. And then in Nairobi, there were 2 shops that I used to frequent. I liked going there. One was instrumental shop, Shankar Lal and Sons. And there was another shop which was really unique in East Africa, or Nairobi, was Asanand and Sons. And they used to allow you to play EPs and LPs. So I got into the habit of going there and putting some, during those days, EPs were very popular. LPs were popular. So I was playing around. I'm not always, but let's say once a week or twice a week, So those years gave me grounding in some music, and of course, Beatles were at the forefront. So Western music, Beatles, pop, all kind of music was very much around. And then in 1970, I came to London, and then the curiosity really began. I arrived just in May 1970, and then 3 months I just went all over London, visiting all the historic places. And then I stumbled upon a poster which said Festival of Arts of India, Sanskritic Festival of Arts of India. And it was being presented at the Festival Hall and Queen Elizabeth Hall. And it ran for several days. So I took the courage and went backstage to meet people who were part of it. And luckily, having passed the security, they called the deputy director or administrative director of Sanskrit, Mr. Sukumar Pathak. And it is he who actually took me as an intern, just to watch and help and whatever. Because he found my interest really very strong. So that's how it started. So I attended the festival conference, press conference, and the photograph that you have of George Harrison seated next to Raviji, who is actually tuning the Tanpura for Girija Deviji, who is seated on the right side. So it was a festival press conference, and there were all the great masters who are great masters now, 50 years on. You had Srimati Girija Devi. There is Uma Sharma, whose photo is between Raviji and George Harrison. Then on the other side, seated up Pandit Satyadev Pawar, Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma ji, Hari Prasad ji, Pandit Vinay Bharat ji, and Srimati Girija Devi is out of the picture, but she's there. So
That's the picture.
that's how it all started. Yeah.
Let's see that. Let's see that. Beautiful. I love this picture, Jay.
This is Girija Devi next to Raviji's Girija.
Yes. Between Guruji and Girjaji is Satyadev Pawar.
Yeah,
and then you have Uma Sharma and George Harrison.
Yeah, further on the right is Pandit Vinay Bharat ji.
Okay. Beautiful picture. Beautiful.
So this is Gaurav. This picture,
yeah,
is the most important picture of my life, because this is how I saw Raviji for the first time seated. And I'm behind. I'm a junior kid. I'm behind. Where all the elders are in front, and I'm just simply observing all this.
That is so beautiful, so beautiful. So this is your first impression. This is
first impression of Raviji. Yeah.
Beautiful, and the passion for arts, a passion for Indian music. Yes. How did it develop? How did it start?
It developed during the festival. It really developed during the festival because everything was so new. And I was so excited. I was still in my shorts,
My God.
I used to buy a ticket from Finchley Central, half price, and I used to enjoy, and I used to come home late, and it was just, I was just full of it. And then my school started. School had already started by then. I was new to the school. And then I got involved with, I was one of the very few Indians in the school. And I was befriended by 4 or 5 English friends, who became my friends after I had to go through the initiation ceremony by fighting one of their members. And I won, And then there's a guy called John. He asked me whether I knew Ravi Shankar. By that time, I had met Raviji. And I said, I've just met him. I met him with George Harrison. And, John he became a very dear friend of mine since. And I gained respect from the members. And they called me the unofficial ambassador of Indian art and music at school. So that continued.
Amazing,
That
amazing.
continued, and I tell you about the festival. Festival was a gathering of all the musicians. Each musician or dancer got 15 to 20 minutes. And the festival ran across 7 days. And there were different slots for different artists. Some concerts were presented at the festival hall. Some were presented at the Queen Elizabeth Hall. So my association with the South Bank was it's now 50 years old. And you can imagine that for several years after the first initiation, I stayed there till 1978, And during that time, I think it was the song, the Tumri of Srimati Girija Devi, that prompted me to learn or to know more about the language, the lyric, the bandish. And then after the festival, I decided that I'll try and learn Hindi as a supporting uh, language course
Language.
in addition to my general subjects. So I got in touch with the University of London and they had a Hindi O&A level. So I got the reading list, I got the books, and then at that time, all the library books from India were held at the India Office Library in Blackfriars. Now everything has been moved to the British Library. So my reading list came from the India Office Library. Some books I bought. And at my local church and library, there were only 3 to 4 Hindi books, and one book was pivotal, which showed the language, the alphabet, and so forth. So I took these 3 books out, and whenever I wanted a book from the India Office Library, they used to loan it to the local library because some books were not to be allowed to be
Yeah.
given. So I think I picked up the language, the alphabet between 1970 to 72. In 72, I was quite proficient in the base of just simple Hindi. And then I continued, and in 1974, alongside my physics, mathematics, 2 maths, and this extra subject was Hindi. And then when I got my results, I was very proud because I got grade B, and the course was so beautiful. I was basically self-taught, but I had a lot of help from outside groups, namely the 2 radio programs, the Hindi Vibhag from Voice of America and the Hindi service of the BBC. So they were my gurus, if you see what I mean. Today you have the YouTube as your guru. On those days, my radio, and I was gifted with a very beautiful radio, very powerful radio. I could pick up signals from all over the world. And these 2 programs were pivotal in my raising the vocabulary, understanding of the language, and so forth. And during the early 70s, I also met my mentors. I got involved with these great people, by communicating with them. And the first one was Aina Dev Angadi Saab. Aina Dev Angadi was before Mr. Virendra Shankar's whose festival that I joined. From the 1940s to 1960s, really. Sri Aina Dev Angadi was pivotal in promoting
Asian Music Circle.
That's right. And his son used to come to my school to teach music. So I have that relationship. And in one of the class, he brought an LP, and the cover of the LP was Sri Devan Bhattacharya's great research and field recordings. And this recording is still etched in my memory. So I met Sri Devan Bhattacharya in the early 70s, and much later I made contact with him 15, 20 years ago. So these 3 masters, and then I was blessed with one very important figure in my life, I call my real guru, if you see what I mean, Pandit Vishnu Narayan. Pandit Vishnunarayan was a priest, and he was a Sanskrit scholar, and he was very much into the Vedic studies. And anything about Indian philosophy, he was the man to go to. And he put a program together called India and the Philosophical Foundations. So there were various speakers who came, great authoritative figures on the subject. They came and talked about it. But Pandit Vishnu Narayanji was more interested in the Samaveda. And my association with the music interested him quite a bit. So I used to feed him a lot of music and so forth. And I became involved in the recording industry as early as 1973. And I used to really enjoy going to various studios wherever there was recording. And I used to enjoy those sessions, And then I attended several concerts of other great artists, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, Pandit Nikhil Banerjee, Imrat Khan Sahab. And then in 1974, I met Vilayat Khan Sahab. So if you see, all these great people were in my life when I was barely in my teens,
That's amazing. They must have left such an impression.
It is still there.
Everlasting.
And
Yes.
then in 1975, I was introduced to Jay Krishnamurti.
Ah,
And lucky Panditji played at Brockwood Park in 1975. It was pelting, it was rainy, but it was in a big marquee, but the music was ethereal, beautiful. And then a lot of great things happened, after I finished my A levels and so forth, I went into law and I started studying side by side. I was not uh, unhappy about my interest in law, because I then later on continued studying for 3 years, and then in 77, after finishing, I went to the USA and I spent almost a year there. And 1977 was my important year, because when I discussed regular programming with Mr. Virendra Shankar, he said that I'm not interested in presenting a monthly concert. I'm only interested in presenting the festival, and I've got energy only for that. So 3 or 4 times I encountered him to push him, persuaded him, but he said no. Then I decided that yes, if he's not doing it, then I will start. And in 1977, after coming back from USA, I founded an organization called APAM. APAM was an acronym for Academy of Performing Arts and Music, but it was a mouthful. The name did not display what I intended to do. So I just put the organization's name as an acronym, APAM. And from 1977 to 87, I was running regular programs. And then I narrowed the focus of the organization and then changed it into Sama. And
Samad.
Sama has been in existence since 1987. And it was Vilayat Khan Saab's first concert in London. Of course, he played much earlier, but it is he who played the first concert for the newly rejigged organization, Sama. And he played at the Royal in Wembley Conference Center. But going back to 1973, going back to 1972, 71 and 72 period, they were very important, because if you know, Bangladesh was being born, the floods, and the entire misery of the people of Bangladesh, of that region. And I think it was a subject very close to Raviji, and he prompted George Harrison to do something. And the first Live Aid concert was born, the concert for Bangladesh.
Iconic concert.
Madison Square Garden. And, although I didn't attend, of course, being in London, we could get all that feedback. I was in awe. At school, in the school assembly, people ask me about concert for Bangladesh, because they were, as I was the unofficial ambassador, I was unofficial ambassador of the whole region, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, now newly Bangladesh, So it kind of gave me a kind of an inspiration and an acknowledgement that somebody has recognized me as a contributory to Indian art and culture. But simultaneously, there was another phase that not many people know now, that I used to belong from 1970 onwards. I used to belong to a film club called the New Manoj Cultural Club in Kilburn, Government State Kilburn. Every Sunday we used to show Indian films.
Oh.
So my Sundays were very nicely placed. And then during those times with the organization, there were live concerts from the Bollywood Indian cinema. You had Muhammad Rafi Saab, Kishore Kumar ji, Mukesh ji, Hemant Kumar ji, and so forth, So that element was there in the background, but my deep love was for classical. I enjoyed the classical, instrumental, vocal, dances. I enjoyed so much because I saw all the great dances during that period. And then I also saw the inauguration of the Bhavan in 1970.
Yes.
I was an observer. I was young, so I was attending everything.
That was in Bond Street, right?
No. The old Bhavan used to be in New Oxford Street.
New Oxford Street.
It was an old narrow building with 4 floors, and that's where a lot of important meetings took place. And there were some small recitals. There was this library. And then I think the first inaugural concert of Bhavan was at the Royal Albert Hall, where Srimati Yamini Krishnamurti danced. And then you had the 3 sons of Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, Ustad Ashish Khan Sahab, Pranesh ji and Dhyanesh ji. They performed duet in the first half, and the second half was the dance. That's how Bhavan was born, So that was a significant year, 1972. But also, Gaurav, 72 was very important because an important occasion took place. It was an end of an era, but it was also the legacy of the great men going forward, That Ustad Alauddin Khan Sahab passed away in 1972. And there were some memorial concerts. And one of the most important concert, I say, although I didn't attend that concert, it was at the New York's Lincoln Center, was the duet concert of Ravi ji and Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab and Ustad Alaraka Khan Sahab on tabla. And the first 30 minutes summed it up for me. The album, the double album, which is on your screen.
Hembihag.
This is the one. I think
Hembihag, Maj Khamaj, Sindhu Bhairavi.
I think this album, together with the concert for Bangladesh, which is this one, yeah. And then the 2 other albums that really were center of my other albums were Woodstock, Woodstock Festival, then Live at Monterey.
Brilliant.
And this was very important, Ravi Shankar's improvisation.
Yes.
Okay, so looking at that period, I would say that that period was still flower power, flower children. On one hand, you had a peaceful congregation of youth from universities opposing the Vietnam War, and you had Indian music come in, and you can see how Indian music was so spiritual. And normally, many people did not understand what Indian music was all about until Pandit Ravi ji mentioned that this music is for peace and devotion, and it is not to be heard in a in a Western style, that you have to be very quiet. Of course, in Western classical music, you have to be quiet too. But he meant was pop concert, that you got to
Yes.
listen to music attentively. And I think he announced that in few of his live concerts at Woodstock, at Monterey, or also at the concert for Bangladesh. So, in my view, 1967, after he had already met George Harrison and the Beatles, that phase from 1967 to 1974, for me, that was a pivotal years for me, and also what Raviji did. That 1967, he had the Festival of in Music in India. You had two lovely speakers before me, Pandit Shankar and his son. The father and the grandfather was part of that
Yes.
festival. It was a beautiful festival. And then, of course, 67 Monterey happened. 69, you had the Woodstock. So you can see how Raviji made an impact, that being the only Indian musician of stature. And remember, Raviji was quite well known long before all this happened.
Yes.
It is not that because he met George Harrison that he became famous. No. Raviji's contribution after he left Mayhar in the late 30s, he was catapulted. He started performing, and he then became the youngest music director at the All India Radio. And that is a significant period for Indian music because he brought some freshness. And that's how things developed. There was an evolution in him, slow, gradual. And the most important thing, in my view, is that Pandit was at the right place at the right time. And I think he's perhaps the only musician I know that used that opportunity for the betterment for Indian arts and philosophy, music, yoga. It was all the allied arts that people came to know after listening to him, you know. So those were very important concerts. And coming back now, 7 years later, after 1973 was the 1974 Royal Albert Hall concert.
Ha, ha, ha.
I had
Speak
three
about
tickets.
that. Speak
I
about
bought three. I bought three tickets. It was pelting with rain. I come straight from my college. I told my mates we have to go, but my friends were not enthusiastic. Can you just imagine? I'm losing two tickets of two of my friends, and I said, "Okay, you guys can't come, but I'm going."
I'm going, yeah.
And I sat alone in a box. The rear part, first you have the stalls, the center part, then you have the stalls in the round, and I was sitting kind of facing the stage. I was sitting on the east side on one of the boxes. I had three seats in front of the box, but I decided to venture and go. I asked the usher, "Can I sit in the box?" Because it was slightly higher. And that's where I saw the whole festival. And this was the most important concert that I attended in all these years. I would put this concert as in the top three because of a variety of reasons, and I tell you why. You see, Raviji being experienced in creating an orchestral piece. In the early days, I remember in the 60s, he was composing on Rag Parmeshwari. I want to come back to Rag Parmeshwari a little later, but I wanted to say that his arrangement of music was superb. And the reason why I say that, in 1974, Rag Jait, the 10-minute ensemble, was the key. It smashed everything. Look at the beautiful drums, the mridang, the shehnai, the tabla tarang, the sarangi, flute, santur, voices. I mean, look, for example, he had all the greats under one roof, under one unit. You had Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma ji, you had Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurase ji, Dr. L. Subramaniam, Ustad Sultan Khan Sahab, Pandit Rijram Desad, and then you had Pandit Kamlesh Maitra, you had
L. Subramaniam.
L. Subramaniam, V.G. Shankar, Lakshmi Shankar ji, T.V. Gopalakrishnan. I mean, those were the masters, of course, many of them. Ustad Alaraka Khan Sahab. I mean, most of the artists are no more, but there are some still alive. If you ask them what was so significant about it, they'll tell you that that was it. You know, to be able to fly on a sponsored jet of George Harrison. I mean, what group could have had this privilege? And only Raviji, who was a catalyst.
Yes.
You know, he connected people. He connected everybody. And I think after that, as time went by, my first ever closed encounter, although I used to go to concerts and I used to meet him at the end of the concert, I used to take my flyers, ask him to autograph it. And that's how he started remembering me. And then I used to name drop that, you know, I was with Mr. Virendra Shankar and I love music and I've heard so much. And I said I attended all these concerts. Then I started telling him about the LPs that I've heard. So he was very warm and gentle and used to be very happily give autograph. But I think in 1978, Mr. Virendra Shankar ji wanted Ravi ji to perform. And Ravi ji obliged because it was after a long persuasion, dates had to be settled and so forth. It was a morning concert. Now, this concert took place at the annex building of today's Nehru Centre in London.
Ah, okay.
There's a building that exists now. Before that, there used to be a small restaurant down in the 70s. And the top floor was squash courts, 2 squash courts. So that was the old building. At the lower basement was a 150-seater auditorium. After the restaurant vacated, that became part of the Center of Indian Arts, which Mr. Virendra Shankar inherited for the use through the High Commission of India. So this concert took place on 1st October 1978. And Raviji played Rag Parmeshwari. And that rag has still, I recall that. And some great members were in the audience, you know. I think one person I remember was Ustad Munawar Ali Khan, seated right in front. So it had a capacity of 150. It was a floor batak. And it was something next to godliness. So this concert too is etched as my top 10.
And on tabla you had Alaraka ji?
Alaraka Khan Sahab played tabla. Yeah. So this was all important phase, you know. So that's my first 8 years in UK. You can see how I started and how I'm, you know, the phases now really warming up. And by the time I finished my other legal courses that I used to do, and then later on, after I founded APAM, I started to plan my first concerts. The first concert of APAM was of Pandit Vasant Rai, the last student of Ustad Alauddin Khan Sahab. And in the same year, Ustad Shamim Ahmed Khan Sahab came, and Ustad Rais Khan. So those are the early period. Then 78, I repeated Pandit Vasant Rai again. And then in 79, we presented through a friend of mine, Mr. Yogesh Sawata, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab's concert at St. John's St. George's Church, Hanover Square. Because in 77, when I met Kansap in California, I asked him that please do come to London. It'd be an honor. So 2 years later, he wrote a letter saying that I'm coming. Could you do something? I said, yeah. So we got in touch with Hanover Square Church, St. George's, and they had a date. And it was a beautiful concert. Zakir Hussain was on tabla. But something else happened in 1977 that was the most important phase of my life. Because I do things in parallel. I don't do one thing. I joined HMV Record Store in Oxford Street. And I spent 5 years at that, meaning it was only Saturdays in holiday time, because I didn't want to work full time. So I was in charge of getting all the great albums from HMV. At the time, they were affiliated to EMI, Blythe Road in West London. So when I joined, I looked at the Indian section and I really built it up. I had individual nameplate for each artist. And one day, Raviji came into the record store.
Ah, okay.
And he said, "You're here also?" He said, you're omnipresent." I said, with your blessings, I'm moving in the right direction. I love music LPs because I started in 73, and it was 4 years later I joined the most celebrated record store in the world, and what a privilege it was, So I became involved with the selection of music that we could buy, and all the labels from India, from Europe, from America, so forth. And the most important label was the World Pacific.
Yes.
World Pacific of Richard Bach, who really did a great service for Indian classical music. And all the great albums, apart from HMV India, came from the World Pacific. And we ordered everything. And then one day my manager, Roger Stedman, said that there's a huge crate, the crate was 7 foot square. You can imagine it was taller than me. He said it's lying unattended and all he says Indian, So I said, what could it be? And Roger said that it is your duty to go to Blythe Road, West London, and check it out. They'll open the pallet for you. And when they opened, they had 3,000 LPs from the Gramophone Company of India, which was delivered to EMI Blythe Road for selling. So I looked around, they were all neatly stacked, and I could see, I pull out one, and all these 3,000 albums were so fascinating. They were the old LPs of great masters. And there was a whole series of Raviji's recording. So I rang Roger. I said, look, Roger, can you get this sent to Oxford Street? So the whole crate arrived, not as a crate, but they arrived in small segments, and they were shrink wrapped and priced. And I remember taking delivery. The upstairs people were shrink wrapping this album, and they spent most of the day shrink wrapping it through a machine. And they came to me and said, Jay, what is this? It seems like a gold mine. I said, it is. And I showed Roger on the shelves all the masters, including Raviji. And I said, look, this is gold mine. If ever I saw a gold mine, this is it.
This is it.
Gaurav, the good thing was that the section at HMV Record Store had individual sections, as I said. And I had to create new nameplate. So once it got finished, I then sent out by post to about 100, 150 people that we got new delivery. And believe me, in 30 days, those 3,000 LPs had gone.
Really?
Yeah. And I took quite a lot myself, So you can see the significance of 1970s, And as we move down, When I finished law, I returned back to it because it is that time in the late 70s up to 80s, 80, 80, 83, 84, that my love for law connected to music and business. I was searching for a place where I could study a little more. A musician in a concert hall, a musician in a recording studio, relationship with the band, the producer, and so forth. So I started creating modules. And on my second trip to States, I went in 85. I went to the Festival of India, Washington, D.C.
Yes, I want
Uh,
to know about that.
and that concert, in the first half, it was the Kathakali dance drama at the
Yeah,
Kennedy Center.
yeah.
And the second part was Ravi ji and Ali Akbar Khan Sahab and Ustad Alaraka Khan Sahab and Zakir Hussain. They played. And they were all staying at the Watergate Hotel, the famous Watergate Hotel. And I stayed at a nearby hotel, much smaller. And before the concert, the day before, I'd gone to meet them, uh, and we were all there. Everybody was there, and we just I had fun. And then after the concert, the next day, I flew to California. I stayed with Ali Akbar Khansa for 3 days. Then I came to Los Angeles. And that's where I got connected with the University of Southern California because it was the only university apart from UCLA that had modules specifically designed for music and law and entertainment business. So every year they had an annual program. Almost, I did about 18 years altogether from that onwards. Some of the journals are at the back, heavy journals in my library somewhere. So I went through it, and then together with other individual modules I could find here in university and professional places, I could marry them together. So what I was trying to achieve was that how can I be proficient as a music business lawyer and still enjoy the music and still enjoy, the music that I presented. But I also started learning the sarod and the sitar when I first came into it. But I bled a lot. So I kind of, not give up, but just left the instruments. But I think as time went by with my academic program, with my training, and then of course the Sanskritic festival. Sanskritic was still running. It ran for 18 years until 1988. Whereas I continued producing concerts from 1977 onwards. So every year was filled up with events, and I had to fit in my academic program, you know. So I left HME in 81, and then 1982, the Festival of India took place in London. I was invited to participate, but then I think most of the events were already programmed by then. Basil Douglas, Ravi's agent, took one section of the program. The Sanskritic took other programs. So I did only 3 concerts in 82 at the Roundhouse. I did Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma, Pandit Hari Prasadji, and Zakir Hussain. Just at almost the same time as the opening concert of Festival of India. So the entire year, 1982, was fistful of visits to museums, to concert halls, to Riverside Studios, you name it, all the venues. And it was a very comprehensive festival. They had a great exhibition, The Image of Men. And then this festival was repeated in 85. That's why I went to Washington. At the same time, it also took place in France. So you can imagine that India was rising in its cultural, side, and the government of India was sending artists across the globe. So 1982 to 1985, those is festivals. So I continued simultaneously program. And I used to do about 30 to 40 programs a year. And there is no artist left in our Indian music fraternity that I have not presented, you know. So, and mind you, there was no arts council or government funding. It was simply done on the basis of box office, an occasional donation or advertisement in the brochure. But then later on, um, during the late 80s, I started to raise money commercially, So people did come forward. And then in one of the festivals, Autumn Festival, I presented Raviji's son, Ravi Shankar. Uh, uh, and in that festival, we had Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, Ustad Mehmud Mirza, Ustad Sultan Khan Sahab, Pandit Raghunath Panigrahi. And we had 7 concerts. And they're all memorable concerts. They're all recorded. Every concert that I presented was recorded. And so that brings us up to 1989. Then we come into 1990, another important concert at the Barbican. Now, this concert was also with Shubha Shankar, Raviji's son, Kumar Bose, and Pandit Durgalalji. And I remember Chandadara recorded this concert and it brought out, but it was a memorable concert.
Beautiful concert.
Yeah. But in earlier 1982 Festival of India, the opening Festival of India, Raviji did an orchestral piece with Zubin Mehta conducting the orchestra there. And then again, later on in the 80s, there were a number of concerts that Raviji did with orchestral scores. Again, Zubin Mehta ji conducting. So I think we are now left 70s. We are now completing 80s. So my impression of Raviji grew each decade. And the amount of work and contribution he made was so unique. And after that 1990 concert, I knew in my mind that his legacy would be unsurpassed. And he still had a long way to go. So in the 90s, there were other significant concerts. In 93, he presented another concert. This time it was the Rajiv Gandhi Memorial Concert or Foundation Concert at the Albert Hall, where he played with, because Zakir Hussain was there. There was also Partho
Sarathi.
Yeah, he was on Sero. So that was also a great concert. I participated in that concert because I did the publicity and marketing. I was helping. It was in a voluntary capacity because this concert was presented by the festival committee, and they were not conversed with promoting concerts. So I just obliged through my own network. At that time, I was presenting 3 great artists. Pandit Bhimsen Joshi, Ustad Bismillah Khan Sahab, and Ustad Vilayat Khan Sahab. So I used that vehicle to promote Raviji's concert, and that's how I got involved with that, So up to 93 concert, things began to change at my direction a year earlier. The Navras Record Company was formed with Sri Vibhakar Bakshi, Sri Kirit Bakshi's older brother, who was a really technical wizard, and it was very important that 3 of us came together. Mine was artistic A&R input. Vibhakar looked after financial matters, and Kirit was involved with the technical. So the archive that was built up over the years from 77 to up to 1991 became part of Navras. So we started releasing albums. So the first album, the first series was Ustad Mehdi Asadi, not classical, but of course he sang classical ghazals. But that concert too is one of my top tens. It was a living music tradition of India, in 1990, but the recordings were released in 2 years later. So in 92, when the company was born, we had an inaugural concert at the Queen Elizabeth Hall of the same artist. And as years went by, there was a formidable releases each year. So that passion, the deep-seated passion, love for music, all three of us just loved what we did. And then in 95, Kirit Bhai's daughter Nima joined the company to look after all the paperwork and the marketing, because we three were not involved in that side. So company really flourished between 92 right up to 2004-5 period. And when the internet came in, things started to go downhill, that people did not buy CDs. We saw a lot of CDs through concerts. And those concerts between 92 to until my time, I left in 2004, were some of the most remarkable body of work. And I think in the Navras archive, there is at least over 2,100 hours of music.
Oh my
And
God.
we have only seen 300 to 400 hours of music. Now, how do we release this? The next generation, they are all listening to music digitally, and online, So I think this company contribution in recorded music. We, as you know, when I mentioned Richard Bock's contribution for the World Pacific series, I mean, there were so many other artists in that catalog too. Then before that, you had the HMV, recorded all the great masters, but somehow HMV lost out too because it did not nurture what was already in its vault, And I kept on saying that you need to promote, you need to do, and also they needed to pay royalties.
Yes.
And many of the artists were not paid royalties. But I don't want to be judgmental, though that period was different, And then, of course, during our time, there were other labels like Chandara. Chandara also did a fantastic work. It had great catalog, Mr. Nag. But and then Mr. Nag stopped doing those concerts, because of age and health and so forth. We continued. Even I, in 2004, I was experiencing health difficulties because I lost my partner in 2004, and my entire body was going through a change. So I did not know what I was doing, but I had to stop working, and that was on doctor's order, because I could not comprehend what was going on. So I took a back seat, but the Navras catalog continued to be built. And Vivakaji really, I mean, he has as much passion for music as I. And the good thing was that Kirit Bhai also had deep-seated, childlike with the technology, because he was a whiz kid, a self-taught whiz kid, and remarkable. Kirit Bhai and I spent hours together in Northampton, editing, cleaning up, and then doing the artwork for the CD, and it went to the final print. And there was no joy that I ever had than to see a CD coming out at the end of our, So that means the artists had benefit of a concert fee, a fee for the recording, and where video was concerned, a video fee. The 3 bites of a cherry, Gaurav. Can anybody say that now? That was the time. Yeah. So this is now from 92, 93, and then 94. I continued presenting concerts right up to 2004. 2003 was the last series I did. And then 2004, after my illness, I took a back seat. And then Vivakaji continued the work until this online piracy and uploading. And there was no sale really. And now, thankfully, it is now digitally available, through Sony India, who acquired the catalog. But it is important to let the people know that all these years music is preserved and the public will have a chance to listen to this music during the creative uh, power of the musicians.
True.
And
Very
remember,
true.
Gaurav, that when I started in my early teens, there was the first generation that I was associated with, both musicians as well as listeners. And then there came the flow of the second generation. They too enjoyed what we did. And it was simply the passion and the drive that I had in me that I pushed the focus forward and forward. And I think that was like a booster rocket, if you see what I mean. That something was pushing me in all direction, in the music business, the fraternity, the listeners, and so forth. So in a way, I was aggregating all this. And I have beautiful letters from the first generation listeners. I've kept a record of all of them. And then the second generation also felt indebted. They said that they used to come with their fathers, parents to the concert. But I can't say the same for the third generation, because third generation is somewhat changed, because they're getting everything in the palm of their hand, all music. India is changing. There are a lot of festivals in India. India's muscle in the financial world has increased fourfold. There's a lot of there used to be a lot of disposable income, so people were buying CDs and everything, So the CD business really closed several years ago. Currently, there is a sizable stock of those recordings under Navras, which are now going to be relaunched through the Sama website, And so people will have benefit of what happened X number of years ago. And, the difference between the CD that we produce and other people produce was simply that the liner notes were authoritatively written. And that was taking a person through the music, what they could find. And it was an interesting part of our service to include liner notes that are very strong in content. So we gave artists and the audience something that other companies did not provide. That was the distinction. And the artwork on Navras CDs was original. We used the miniature paintings. We used paintings that were professionally done. So the visual artists got benefited. The museums got benefited. So the thing is that every aspect of our work was simply aesthetically driven. And that's what propelled me to do even better. So in 13 years of my stay in Navras, they were the best years of my life. And when health takes over, you have to forget everything. So I became detached, And then I got involved with another company called Satchel, but that was a different ball game altogether. It was short-lived, but it was good. I enjoyed working on Satchel. They produced 26 titles. And then the most famous title of there was the cover version of Take 5 of jazz and bossa nova, but it was experimental. And the video reached 1.3 million in short time. But interestingly, some of the videos on Navras that Vivakaji has uploaded, they are remarkable. I mean, Ustad Bismillah Khan Sahab, for a classical musician, it is a great privilege to even get 100,000. But this one has reached 6.5 million.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so the thing is that yes, there's a lot of music out there, but people are not paying for it. Today, in the pandemic, COVID-ridden period, musicians cannot monetize. They can't perform live. Where is the livelihood? And also, the business houses are not doing their bit. They're not putting any money towards the arts in the UK. I do not know about India, but I can safely say that people in the UK should do more for the arts. There are so many business houses who could have come up with a simple formula to help the artists who are struggling, you know. And I am to start something very soon that every concert ticket that we sell, we will give one CD free.
Oh, good.
And that money will go towards a cause, you know. And I'm already in touch with so many of the musicians fraternity here and in India, but I'm just waiting for the right time, you know.
Right time. Yeah.
And right now I'm in consultation with the Arts Council, and I've been so last 4 years that strategically help is on the way for the artists, to organizations to sustain themselves. So as the pandemic comes to an end, they'll be able to come back to the live scene. And I've already curated a small festival in Cambridge for another society called Indus. And that is live music, but it's going to be streamed live. And under the rules and regulations of COVID, we are going to have 50 to 60 people in the audience. So we must encourage life as far as possible. We have to defeat the pandemic issue. We can't simply be, you know, curating programs in somebody's lounge. You know, people need to go out, you know, and they need to face. And if you take precautions, nothing will happen to you. I mean, you know, when the city council says that it has to be pandemic condition fulfilled, we have to make sure that all the uh, opportunity for, you know, taking precaution is there. You know, the social distancing in the concert hall. Look at all the concert halls in the world are closed. Look at the South Bank, Barbican. I cry middle of the night, you know, and see what's happening. You know, theater. The world famous London theatres are closed. So this is serious. We have to fight together, and we have to
Very
help.
serious. Very serious.
We have to help. We have to help everyone. You know.
True.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jay, if you allow me, there are a lot of people watching. Lot of people watching. But before that, I remember Sukanya ji telling me about the 1985 Guildhall concert.
yes, I remember that. She called me once. And of course, I was associated with many concerts of Raviji, but that was one I remember also. I remember getting a call. I used to be in Finchley at that time because I lived in Finchley from 1970 to 94. Then I moved to Bayswater at the Kufa Gallery, you know. But that's no more now. But when Sukanya ji rang me, she said, "Hey Jay, I'm doing this concert for Ravi ji, you know." I mean, she said, "I need your help." I said, "Come over." So I mean, she'd organized everything, but she wanted marketing and publicity and so forth. So she came to my place in Finchley, and we just put the database together of that time. And I remember hiring gymnasium mats for people to sit on the floor and so forth. But it was a very nice concert at the Guildhall School of Music. I've presented quite a few concerts there myself. But this concert was very beautiful. And it was a nice ambience, you know. And I still remember that. Yeah.
Beautiful. I heard the cassette of that, and
Yes.
beautiful concert that was. So I would like to read some messages, Jay.
Yeah.
A lot of people who have joined us. We have, I'll just name them: Neerav Desai, Nisha Chatterji, uh, Chinama is watching Sukanya Shankar from London. She says Namaskar. Then Angarika, Khyanath Mitra, Kumar Acharya. Nirav Desai is saying Namaste Gaurav ji and Jai Bhai. Kumar Acharya saying Sama Arts have been the best supporters and promoters of Indian and South Asian music in the UK. We have Subhadra Desai. We have our friend Satish ji from Bombay, Satish Vyas, the noted Santur Maestro. Then we have Sunira Kasliwal saying, Hello Gaurav, it's interesting to listen to the history of recording and preservation of our musical heritage. The hard work done by so many people. My humble regards to all of them. So these are some messages which has come. So it's been very interesting, fascinating,
I want
absolutely.
to, before we switch off, I just wanted to share something with you. Uh, this was the one of the best covers. Unfortunately, the lady who painted this passed away,
Yes,
recently
yeah.
in
Yes,
Los Angeles.
yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful that is. Absolutely beautiful. I think we have some pictures which I think Nabarun wants to show.
Yeah. And I
Oh,
want to show you a few
yeah,
covers on.
let's go through one. Yeah. So let's
Okay.
stay here now. And now tell us, Jay.
Well, this painting,
Yeah.
when the festival was announced, I saw this flyer in one of the art centers, and it grabbed my attention. And I went straight to the Royal Albert Hall and I bought 3 tickets. This was months before the festival.
Months before. Beautiful event. You
And it's
spoke
very
about it.
beautifully presented. It was concert in a semi-arc way. And I think I still, although I understand the video of this concert is out, but it's a single or two camera. I do not remember, but at least the preservation was done, not for the intention of mass producing, but it's an
No.
archive.
Yes, of course. It's very,
And my
very
first acquisition was this book, the first
yeah.
book of Raviji.
Yes.
And on the back, they have exercises.
Yes.
I did these exercises when I had acquired a guitar,
Oh,
Then I
that is
switched to,
very, very important and very
yeah.
useful, Jay.
And then Oliver was also involved with this book,
Ragmala.
yeah, the Ragmala. I read it. And then recently the biography which came out, the
The
Indian
Indian Sun.
Sun. I think
Yeah.
this book which Oliver sent me completed the unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And I tell you one thing, it's a fascinating reading, and I think Raviji's contribution on the concert stage and off stage has been perhaps the most remarkable life of a man. And I could say that in 1970, if I had the right words, I would also say meeting with the remarkable men. Being a remarkable person. So you see, to sum it up, mine has been an inspired life.
Yes.
And every morning I wake up, I'm inspired because I'm connected with music, the music of the business of music, especially in the publishing field, which is new to India. Music publishing is very new to India. It's still in its infancy.
Yes.
And then mentoring young musicians, how to go about in the concert world, how to get engagements, that right now I'm looking at changing the landscape in UK by providing music to smaller venues without the trapping of big concerts, expenses. It's just what the pocket can afford or people can afford. So there is a growing interest in the suburban, urban places, and villages, small cities, small towns. So these platforms are being created, and they are being created through several other organizations. And I think once the pandemic is over, you'll see the changes in UK's artistic landscape. It will be growth industry.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jay. It's been absolutely wonderful having you and
Thank you,
going
Gaurav.
this fascinating life of yours.
Thank you. I still have a long way to go.
I wish you all the best for that, and I wish you really
I tell you what my routine is, yeah?
yes, yes,
Before I switch off. I go for an hour's walk every day or every other day when I get time. I've just started this walkings. Before I used to go every day, but there was a lull, then I stopped. But now I'm just building my stamina. For the first time I went shopping, I got myself a tracksuit, shoes, and the right gear to go in this wintry London place, So I think health is important. If
yes,
you look after your health, you can do a lot, So that is how I am building stamina, making sure that I'm okay. If I'm not okay, nobody's okay. So there you
yes,
are. But I think there is a growing period of music after pandemic. People just have to be patient. But
yes,
we need more money from the industries.
yes. And with those really insightful words, and most important, with that positive note, uh, I take leave.
Thank you, Gaurav, and thank
Thank
you
you,
to all
Nabarun.
the
Uh,
yeah, and also to Sukanyaji and to the Ravi Shankar Foundation,
yeah,
and all my good wishes. If there's anything that I can do for the foundation, just let
Sure,
me.
sure. We will need your help whenever we come out with our magazine. As earlier, Gaurav that told you that we are
Thank
also coming from a music publication through our magazine known as Musicarum, which will be soon launched by us. So we need your help on that text.
Welcome. Thank you.
Jay.
Thank you,
Good
Jaji, to
night.
having us.
Good
Stay
night.
Good
well,
night.
stay safe, and see you soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank
Take
you. Bye
care. Bye
bye.
bye. Bye bye.
And to the viewers of Pandit Ravi Shankar Music Foundation, next week at 8 p.m. Friday, we will be once again here with another eminent personalities. Till then, good night and be safe.